Alright, Common Gamer here, and to read Chapter 11 of World War II Air War, The Men, Machines, the Missions. Chapter 11, The Bomb That Ended World War II. It was the second atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki that entered the Japanese to surrender. I'm kind of against the second atomic bombings, and the atomic bombs killed a lot of innocent civilians had nothing to do with the war. So, alright. Atomic bombing of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945 has been the subject of numerous books and articles since the time, many by scientists and others who particularly paid in the development of the world's first atomic bombs. The personal story of Brigadier General Paul W. Tibbets, who flew the Boeing B-29 Enola Gay, and the individual accounts of its crew members have also been published since that eventful mission more than half a century ago. Strongly, however, the story of the second mission, which bombed Nagasaki, has not been fully told, mostly because of the current rush of events leading to Japan's complete surrender. Then, too, it may be because the second atomic strike nearly ended disarray. It further perverted the veracity of Murphy's Law, that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Tibbets, the colonel in charge of the 509th Cabell's group, had posted his unit of 15 B-29 Superfortresses, and one of the first honest Air Force bombardment outfit ever assembled, operated from Tin An Island, and the Marines then controlled the largest air base in the world. He and his crew had made a picture-perfect 2,900-mile flight and had dropped the uranium bomb called Little Boy squarely on target. The single bomb, weighing 8,900 pounds, wiped out nearly 5 square miles of Hiroshima, 60% of the city. More than 78,000 of the city's total population of 348,000 were killed. An estimated 51,000 were injured or missing. It had been an exhausting 12-hour mission. After returning to Tibet was granted on the tarmac by General Karl Spetsnaz, commander of the Strategic Air Force, who planted the Distance Grounding Service cross on the Red-swept Regiment flying suit. Meanwhile, U.S. President Harry S. Truman was aboard the USS Augusta, returning from a conference with Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin at post-mortem Germany. Upon hearing the news, Truman decided that it's the greatest thing in history. He promptly announced to the world the existence of an atomic bomb that had been developed under the code name Manhattan Project. The War Department then issued a number of press releases giving the history of the project, information about production facilities, and the biographies of key people, and an unusual example drafted by William L. Lawrence, a science report for the New York Times, who had known about the A-bomb for several months prior to the Hiroshima mission. Oppressed by the need of complete secrecy, he had visited the production facilities and had followed the group to Tainan. Within hours, newspapers around the world were carrying stories about the bomb and the principles involving and spreading the atom. They codenamed the bomb development. The assertion caused the role of Major General Leslie R. Groves and so that the Manhattan Project and contributed some of 30,000 engineers and scientists in solving the mystery of the atomic energy potential. Secretary of War Henry L. Shelton was one of the few top leaders who had been totally informed of the bomb's top secret development every step of the way, and he had approved the target selections. He announced that improvements would be forthcoming soon, will increase by several fold of the interest of the Hiroshima bomb. The purpose of the target cities had been warned. Leaflets had been dropped on 11 Japanese cities on July 27, telling the citizens that America was in possession of the most destructive explosive ever devised by man. They had other warnings given to the Japanese during the preceding weeks, while the 20th Air Force Superfortress firebombed the country provincial intersection cities. By the means havoc of a single bomb could produce was unimaginable, and the warnings were not taken very seriously. Just a day before, July 26, a declaration had been issued at postmortem that notified the world of an introduction of three of the Allied nations concerning Japan, the Patrician Land, Sea, and Air Force of the United States, the British Empire, and the and of China, many times reinforced by their armies and air fleets of the West, are pursued to take the final blows upon Japan. The military post-war treated and by the determination of all Allied nations to participate the war against Japan until she ceased to resist. We can call upon the government of Japan to proclaim now the unconditional surrender of all the Japanese armed forces and to provide proper and adequate assurance of the good faith in such action. The alternative for Japan is prompt and auto decision. The post-mortem declaration was debated vigorously at the highest levels of the Japanese government. A declaration was sent to Moscow to request that the Soviet Union, then still at peace with Japan, act as a mentor. It was hoped that if the Soviets would agree to that role, it might be possible to negotiate terms that would be the most favorable to Japan. There was great decision among the Japanese military leaders, for few wanted to submit an unconditional surrender. Senior diplomats and original citizens, however, proved that the Japanese cabinet would take advantage of offer in the order to bring a permanent end to the war. On the other hand, War Minister Kiriaki Energy, the chiefs of the Army and the Navy staffs, adamantly refused to accept the terms of the post-mortem agreement. The result was the Japanese government preferred to ignore the Allies' declaration. There was no such to the declaration itself, containing a warning that most devastating weapon ever created would be forked because of the current discussion of communications in Hiroshima after the atomic attack. There have been reports of damage where mineral fragility, where the world waited for the radiation shock. Japanese officials were trying to grasp the extent of the damage. Meanwhile, President Truman issued the following statement: "It was to scare the Japanese people from desertion that the ultimatum of July 26 was issued at postmortem. The leaders promptly rejected the ultimatum of they do not know accept our terms. They may exact a rain of ruin from the air, the lakes of which have never been seen on this earth." It was known that there had been another diplomatic moves made previously by Japanese emissary, though neutral nations that entered Japan might surrender under certain terms that we unacceptable to America and its allies, but when nothing definitive was heard from the Japanese, plans proceeded to drop the second atomic bomb. The second mission was designed Special Mission Number 16. B-29 would carry Fat Man, heavier than Little Boy and more complex. The prime target was Kimura. The secondary target was Nagasaki. The 509th Operation Order Number 39 of August 8, 1945, Assistant Major Charles W. Sweeney, Commander Officer of the 339th Squadron, as pilot in command of aircraft number 297, nicknamed Boxcar. Major James I. Hopkins, Jr., Group Officer, was assigned to fly a second B-29 named Full House, which would carry photographic evidence and scientific personnel. On board would be Group Captain Leonard Cheshire, Winston Churchill's official reflective. Captain Fred Black, inside of flying his own plane, would pilot the Great Esther, named for Captain Kermit K. Betham' ability as a bombardier and his outlet experience with the abut sextet. Plane would be carried the same Tesla electronic measurement drills, and with Major Sweeney flew it on the Hiroshima flight. It would be carrying William L. Lance, the New York Times reporter who had been chosen at the initiation of a Manhattan Project. His response would win him a personal prize. A fourth aircraft was to proceed to Iwo Jima and stand by in case of an early abort by either of the backup aircraft. Two weather observation planes were proceeded to the target areas 1 hour ahead of the strike aircraft. Since the order was to bomb visually for the greatest accuracy, it was determined that the area be visible to the bombardier. Sweeney's crew normally had 10 men. 3 others were added. Lieutenant Commander Frederick L. Edgeworth, U.S. Navy, the weaponeer in charge of the bomb, had assisted Lieutenant Colonel A. Burns, and the radar counter specialist Lieutenant Jacob Bear, Captain Charles D. Everton, the co-pilot, Lieutenant Frederick Biddleton, third pilot, Captain James F. Biddleton, navigator, Captain Durham Burton, Bombardier Staff Sergeant Avril N. Spitzer, Radio Man Staff Sergeant Edward K. Beckley, Radar Operations Staff Sergeant Adam D. Fire Control Gunner Master Sergeant J. Swinton, Flight Engineer and Staff Sergeant Raymond G. Griffith, and Lieutenant Gunner Fisher was the only man who flew on both atomic bomb missions as a member of the crew strike aircraft. Many have flown the other aircraft on the Hiroshima flight. The crews of the 509th had trained together for almost a year under top secret conditions. They had first gathered at Wendover Field, an isolated base in western Utah, and then flown on the weather range over water navigation missions from Berta Field, Cuba. The personnel of our ninth moved to Teton Bay and Sea in late May and 22, 1945. There was top secret status was the subject of courtesy curriculum that the crews designed for the atomic missions, provided by dropping giant 10,000-pound pumpkins on 12 Japanese targets. Each pumpkin contained 5,000 pounds of explosives. The B-29, the 109th, had been modified to deliver the atomic bomb and were unable to carry conventional bombs. Instead, they carried the pumpkins painted orange and shaped like Fat Man. The pumpkins also had been used during the strategic training, preferably fuse, prevent airburst. The fracture of atomic bombs were installed. About 45 pumpkins bombs had been brought from the States. According to Tibet, the crew was to accept that Major General Curtis E. May, the commander of the 20th Air Force, offered 100 more. The carefully planned elements of one of the world's most sustainable air units came together on schedule. Backed by the highest national priority for surprise, the two atomic bombs were the result of the work of thousands of people. They had been a responsibility, potential that a bomb could be controlled and released on demand. The development of the atomic bomb can be said to have begun in the 1920s to early 1930s. It was the cerebral physics, most of them in Europe, uttered theories about ways to unlock this belief to exist when the atom. One of those physicists was Leo Szilard, a Hungarian who fled from Nazi Germany to England in 1933. Szilard theorized that in certain circumstances it might be possible to set up a nuclear chain, liberate energy and scale, and construct atomic bombs. He urged British officials to conduct research to prove or disprove his theory. Meanwhile, two German physicists, Otto Hahn and Les Bertrand, experimented with radioactive uranium in an effort to produce a chain reaction. Mortar fled from Nazi Germany to Sweden in 1938, and though Otto President to the United States, Albert Einstein, also a refugee scientist and winner of the 1921 Nobel Peace Prize for Physics, to explain the military potential of atomic energy. Einstein, by then well known in America, wrote a letter in August 1931 to President D. Roosevelt. Some recent work had later said the words need to verbatim may be turned to new source of energy and opportunity future. Roosevelt approached the group of scientists and earlier command with different action. Meanwhile, scientists in Germany and Japan were also constructing potential of atomic energy for war use. It took the attack of Pearl Harbor to stir the United States into action. In 1942, Dr. Rememberce, head of U.S. Office of Science Research Development, confirmed to the President that an atomic weapon could be developed. the Manhattan Project was authorized. General Leslie R. Groves, a tough non-army group engineer officer, was put in charge. Enrico Fermi, an Italian physicist working with a team of fellow scientists at the University of Chicago, built the first nuclear reactor on a squash court under the stands of the university football stadium. On December 2nd, 1942, the world's first self-sustaining controlled nuclear reaction was achieved. There were at least two methods that could be used to produce an explosion. Both expensive but reliable. Expensive were wood, oak, tin, asheville to produce an ultimatum that the site Y near Los Alamos, New Mexico, with Dr. Robert Oppenheimer in charge. Little Boy, 10 feet long and 20 inches in diameter, was similar to a gun and a winch of bullet made of uranium-235, which fired into a target also of uranium-235, which the two collided, a separate mass attempt and a chain reaction. An explosion would occur. No preliminary field test. The Batman measured 10 feet 8 inches along with 5 feet in diameter. It contained a spear of plutonium. Commercial explosives surrounding the plutonium were fired, so the plutonium was converted into a supernatural mass, producing a chain reaction, and an explosion. Batman was tested in New Mexico desert near Alamo. On July 16, 1945, a blinding explosion, the world's first nuclear blast, was equivalent to 18,600 tons of TNT. By that time, the more complex Batman had been tested. Most of Little Boy's elements were already en route to Tehran. After Tibbet's return from Hiroshima, Sweeney's crew watched as Batman was loaded on August 8th. Sweeney created fear, he said, later was of goofing up. He said, "I'd rather face the Japanese than Tibet and shame if I made a stupid mistake." Sweeney did not make any stupid mistakes, but the second atomic mission seemed doomed from the start. When a Korean general took a mission, Vasco threw a fault of Sweeney. The two target cities had been carefully selected. They had personally not been bombed heavily by LeMay's B-29, so the after-action report noted that assemblement of atomic bomb damage would not be confused by having to eliminate previous industry of highly explosive damage. Karuga, the northeast corner of Kershaw, was chosen as the primary target for Batman because it was the enemy's principal production source for automatic weapons. It was also the site of the Mitsubishi Steel and Arms Works and was one of the largest shipbuilding and naval centers in Japan. Nagasaki, the secondary target, was the third largest city on Kyushu, leading a shipbuilding repair center. It was not considered a completely virgin target now ever because it had been bombed many weeks before by twin NATO centers and consistently bombed by 20th Air Force bombers. Narita was originally considered as a third target, but it was too far away from the other two cities. The crews were given their final briefings during the early morning hours of August 9th. They would climb to the bombing altitude of 31,000 feet. Meanwhile, two weather planes would report the conditions over both targets. Radio silence between the bombers was to be absolute. If any of the planes had to ditch, rescue ships and submarines were in position. Also, aircraft were on alert too. We dispatched the location, a downed plane on its crew with his airplane stripped of all air armament except two 50 caliber tail guns. Sweeney lifted boxcar off at 3:39 a.m. Titan time. The flight route to Korea was originally planned to Peru via Iwo Jima, but bad weather forecast changed to Yokosuka and the Yokosuka en route. Commander Usho Fatman was boxcar arrived the result to the Great Usho there. Due to poor visibility, Hopkins and Full House had lost contact with other planes. If he had been agreed that Sweeney would not linger more than 15 minutes over the rendezvous point, but he circled for 45 minutes looking for Hopkins. Meanwhile, Hopkins was circling at another point, many miles to the south. Breaking radio silence, Hopkins called out, "Chuck, where in the hell are you?" Sweeney did not answer. Frustrated, he told the crew, we can't wait any longer." We returned to Karuga with a single B-29 escort. He waited the mission to be a complete success, but it had been difficult to call it. The explosion was not properly documented by photography, but that the equipment on Hopkins' plane was reduced. Meanwhile, in the bomb bay, something had gone wrong. The black box containing the electrical switches armed the bomb had a red light. As long as the light blinked in a regular rhythm, it meant the bomb was properly armed. If it blinked irregularly, something malfunctioning. Lieutenant Burns, the electronics test officer, was the first to notice. Suddenly began to flash wildly. He had assaulting the box cover to search for the trouble. Quickly tracking all the warnings, Burns found the problem. The wiring on two small rotary switches had been reset somehow. He quickly hooked them properly. It would have been worse if it had been the timing fuse. Would have been had less than 1 minute to find the trouble before Batman had gone off. Although Sweeney had confirmed that the weather over Korea would have been favorable for visual bombing, it said that 3/10 cloud cover over the city was now obscured by heavy cloud cover. Additional smoke from a fireball raid the previous night on previous Yemo made events worse. Staff Sergeant Dehart was the tail gunner position pack. The fighters detected on radar. Staff Sergeant Koa thought he saw fighters through the haze. Lieutenant Albee recovered happened next. We spotted about 50 minutes made the pass from different directions by Big-Hand Bombardier reported that he couldn't bomb visually. It was a time the crew chief, Master Sergeant Kurt, reported that 600 gallons of fuel in the bomb bay auxiliary tanks could not be transferred. We needed the extra 600 gallons badly. They had not been offered with the no choice now. After a Strasbourg exit, Sweeney turned towards Nagasaki, hoping that the weather there was better. When they arrived, the city was obscured by 9-tenth cloud cover with very few holes. Ellsworth and Sweeney considered bombing by radar against orders, just with the risk of having an armed bombardment that had been ordered to bring it back if they could not bomb visually. Near the official to reduce field supplies. No one wanted to have to ditch in the East China Sea or try to land on Okinawa, the nearest friendly base, with the armed fat man on board. We stretched the approach to Nagasaki. Orve said, but Berhan couldn't see the target area in the city east of the harbor. Vanvelt, the navigator, was checking by radar to make sure we had the right city. It looked like we would be dropping the bomb automatically by radar. At the last few seconds of the bomb ran, Brown yelled into his mic, "I've got a hole. I can see it. I can see the target." Apparently had been spotted and opened in the clouds. Only 20 seconds before releasing the bomb, and just later, Bertrand and told Tibbets, "I saw my aiming point. There was no problem about it. I got the crosshairs on it. I killed my ray. I killed my draft. The bomb had to go." When Ryan shouted bombs away over the intercom, Sweeney wheeled the B-29 around a sharp 60-degree left bank and turned 150 degrees away from the area, as they had all practiced many times before. Approximately 50 seconds after release, a bright flash lit up the cockpit. There, everyone had donned dark goggles. It was more dazzling than sunlight. According to Overview, even with my polarized glasses on, I could see fires starting and dust and smoke spreading in all directions. An ugly-looking mushroom began to emerge from the center. It spread and began rising directly towards our B-29. Right after the blast, we had lunged downward and away from the radioactive cloud. We felt 3 separate shock waves, the first being the most severe as the mushroom cloud kept climbing towards us. Beneath flames of sticky pink were shooting out of its indicator. I had a sketch feeling in the pit of my stomach that we were going to be enveloped by the cloud. We had been warned many times about possibly radiation poisoning if we flew into it. Accordingly, I think the mushroom cloud missed us by 125 yards before we plunged away from it. The briefings and all the practice we had evade tactics. Now we had special meaning. Reporter Lance flying nearby the great Escher turned away the scene. We watched a giant pillar of purple fire 10,000 feet high shoot upwards like a meteor coming from the earth. Instead of the outer space, he wrote later in his award-winning book, Dejan Over Zero, it was no longer smoke or dust or even a cloud of fire. It was a living thing, a new species of being born right before our eyes. Even we watched a giant mushroom cloud came shooting out of the top to 45,000 feet. A mushroom cloud top that was even more alive than the pillar, seeing and falling in white fury of a cream foam. 1,000 geysers rolled into one. It kept swirling and confronting the creature in the act of breaking the bonds that held it down. We were the last saw it. It had changing shape into a flower-like form. Its giant petals came downwards, plainly white outside, rose inside a bubbling pillar, had gone into the rainbows. Major Hopkins saw the cone of smoke from 100 miles away, and flew topward like area after the explosion. However, the area was completely covered by clouds and smoke, hence no ground damage could be observed. Sweeney made one wide circle of the mushroom cloud, then headed towards Titan. Now it's a new danger come from them. The fuel supply was dangerously low. They changed course for Okinawa, which everyone on the flight deck was waiting for the fuel gauges on crucial flight engineer consoles. Sweeney had pulled the props back to a range extending low RPM and leaned out the fuel mixture controls as far back as he dared. He finally then told land about 50 miles short of the island. Even when they spotted Yurton Field, it seemed like they would have to ditch short of the runway. While Sweeney flew, Emily called the tower for landing instructions. He received no reply. He broadcast a mayday while Sweeney told Van Pelt and